PodcastCoug Season 2, Episode 3.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Hey, I'm James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network. Glad you're back. We are on Season 2, Episode 3, and we do this every single week during Cougar football season. It's about a 25, 30-minute program, breaking it up into two segments. The first part, we're going to talk about the Boise State game last Saturday, and the second half of the segment, we're talking about the Oregon State game coming up this afternoon on 2:30 kick. We're going to start off briefly just to mention, by the way, PodcastCoug is all over at PodcastCoug.com, or you can find us, of course, on iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, which is a dedicated podcast app. So when you hit the subscribe button, PodcastCoug is going to come to you every week automatically to your phone or your desktop. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're interested. Well, here we go. Hey, just kind of an update for the Nevada game on the 23rd, 3 p.m. kick. It's another afternoon game for Nevada. That's great news. And also the Cougar Prowl has been moved. They moved it last year. So this Saturday, Oregon State, we're going to talk about Oregon State on the second half of the program, but 12:15 right outside the Hollenberry Fieldhouse. The buses are going to roll up at 12:15, somewhere around there. Coach Leach and all the coaches, the players, the band, Butch, the Crimson Girls, cheerleaders, and everything's happening right there at about 12:15 on Saturday, right outside the field house. All right. The Miracle at Martin, the comeback of the ages. With 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Washington State trailed 31-10 over Boise State. Earth-shattering ride. That's right, the Cougs pulled off the comeback of all comebacks. The win was powered by the defense, bolstered by an offense that found a late rhythm thanks to Tyler Helinski and guided by a special teams unit that literally kept you on the edge of your seat all night long. You know, the running game was absolutely non-existent the entire game, and that's got to change. We talked about it last week about James Williams and our dink and dunk, and Luke can hit those actually the running backs on just little dink and dunk plays. But I'll tell you, Boise State was a completely different outcome. As bad as the team played at times, words can't fully describe literally how meaningful and incredible it was for the Cougs to come back from 21 points down at 8 with 8 minutes to the game. It was just a great win, and everyone can literally hold on to their heads high, knowing that when it mattered in the fourth quarter, they came together. We beat a team that has a reputation for finishing games. What an incredible win. And how about the Pac-12 games at night? What's up with that? You know, Pac-12 games at night, some of them are just crazy. And again, this was, just the comeback of the ages. Very unpredictable, down 21 in the fourth quarter at the 8-minute mark. The comeback of the ages really started with a Boise State turnover with Pelluer intercepting with an interception return. And then this was the key marquee of the game for me, the big part of the game that really when it turned is that Boise State quarterback Montel Cozart was about to hit the turf on a sack, and Cozart flipped an ill-advised shovel pass right to Pelluer, and then he went in for the score. At that time, then it was Boise State 31, Washington State 24. Later, Helinski hit Jamal Morrow for a pass to the end zone after Boise State forced a punt. The ball hit cornerback Reed Harrison Ducros in the back and was recovered by the Cougs, giving them a short field. Now, that's the point in the game that blew me away. When that forced punt and that ball hit the cornerback, that Boise State cornerback, Reed Harrison Ducros, and Cougs recovered, giving us short field, and wow, the the football gods, right? Boise State We tied it 31-31. Overtime number 1 was a couple of field goals at 34-34. Second overtime, Morrow appeared stopped on 3rd and 2 on the drive's third play, but a second effort gave him the first down, and Helinski hit Tavares Martin for 9 yards on a 2nd and 6 to get to the 1-yard line. Gerard Wicks had the 1-yard run. Good for Wicks, and then Boise State on 3rd and 12. Cozart hit Wilson on a side slant, and he cut up toward the end zone for the score. At Washington State 41, Boise State 41, tied again. Hold on to your seats, third overtime. Boise State, they had a field goal from Hogarth. Cozart found Wilson open over the middle. He was stopped at the 5-yard lines that set him up, forcing the field goal. Boise State 41, Washington State 41. Boise State 41, Cougs 41. 44-41. All right? And then Helinski hit Morrow on a swing pass. And Morrow made Desmond Williams miss a tackle, then broke up on the sidelines, diving for the score. After a short review, the play was upheld and the game was history. Washington State 47, Boise State 44. Let's talk about DVRs. If you're recording at home, most DVRs are set to go an extra hour for sports games, all right, especially football. How many times in a decade do you go 3 overtimes, right? Probably once. And like us, our DVR stopped it after the second overtime, so it just stopped recording. Who would have thought to add an additional half hour to your record mode? But it's unfortunate. Of course, the entire game's on YouTube, and they're playing it all over the Pac-12 networks. The bottom line is WSU's defense forced 3 turnovers and scored on 2 interception returns and held the Broncos, the Donks, to 2 field goals in the first and third overtimes to keep the Cougs in the fight. In a fight, their offense seemed determined to lose, right? We talked about Luke Falk before. Concussion, UCLA game. He's not been the same since. We don't know if it's a concussion, but our offense just wasn't doing anything. They were determined to lose. Once Tyler stepped in, I'll tell you, it just changed the entire momentum. What a bizarre night. The Cougs defense was every bit as good as its offense was bad, and it was on the strength of the defense that Washington State somehow found a way to rally back a 21-point fourth quarter deficit in triple overtime. The turnover shovel pass was the muff punt, down 21, 8 minutes left. Then you look at the Boise State sidelines. There's something about the football gods, that made this night such a remarkable comeback. Both starting quarterbacks out, 2 backup quarterbacks in. The comeback of the decade, and Boise State, you got to look at the doubt starts creeping in. You could just feel it, and then the crowd got into it. The crowd was really silent, especially on the student section for most of the game. The neat thing about the backup quarterbacks is that they are playing with no expectations. The moment Cozart threw that shovel pass right into Pellure's hand, you could feel everyone said, "Hey, we're going to take these guys. We're the better team." And with Cozart there were plays that were made that were not supposed to be made. Cozart was running out of the sidelines, stopping the clock. Cozart throws an incomplete pass at 2nd and 4, and then on the next play, he runs out of bounds. Really? Leach, some people call him a genius at times, and I think he is in a way, and this may be his genius stuff to get the team motivated. His quote is, "This is one of the most constipated offenses on earth." What a way to fire up your team. Luke wasn't playing great, couldn't hit any of his receivers, struggled to find guys open except the short pass. And I don't know if he's not trusting his receivers, so we're going to talk about that in a moment. Tyler comes in and lights it up. Your star quarterback is not playing the level he's capable. So you bring in your backup, and now he's challenged. Iron sharpens iron. You don't judge greatness in a moment. You judge greatness in a career. And the real genius here is Leach and the ability to manipulate the team, to buy into his strategy. It will be, it's going to be interesting to see how Luke steps up and steps up and rises to the occasion. And I'm sure he's going to be fine against Oregon State and the Oregon States and the Nevadas. Luke's going to be fine if he's healthy against Oregon State and Nevada. And he'll look marvelous, right? But when USC gets into town on the 29th, it's not going to be a cakewalk. And frankly, if you ask me, I would, if Luke played like he did on last Saturday, I would rather have Helinski start against USC. And that's not fair to do that to your starting quarterback. But we got to do what we got to do. And if Luke has a hard time trusting his receivers, we've got an issue. And the dink and dunk didn't work, completely shut down our run game. So, it's amazing what competition will do for you. And, are we concerned about our receivers? Tavares Martin had a tough time separating the Boise State corners, and they covered great. And hats off to Boise State for playing really well. Luke was a little tentative, had a hard time trusting his receivers, like I said, missing those chunk plays. We don't have the Rivers or the Gabes in there anymore. And it seems like Luke was hesitant and a little bit too analytical. He may be overanalyzing and not trusting his receivers. He might say, "Hey, I don't have River anymore. I don't have Gabe. I don't have Robert Lewis." And so you're not going to win a lot of games when your longest run is 5 yards. And they indeed stopped our run game as James Williams was completely shut down. Credit to Boise State. We talked about our run game last week, and every week's different. So they shut us down. And it really, the momentum when Tyler came in, it was amazing. And I'm so confident in Tyler Helinski, and we're so fortunate to have such a great backup quarterback that could just step in and light him up. So somebody's got to step up. The problem is that Washington State has never started out on all four cylinders, firing in all four cylinders, starting right out of the gate. It is a young season. We're 2-0. But who's going to step up? We've got to have some big defensive lines. We've got some big defensive lines coming up. Like USC. So somebody's got to step up. Pelluer was the most impactful. Hercules Mataafa, Frankie Lavu were also very impactful. But how about Herc? I'm telling you, we can't get enough of Herc. Hercules Mataafa. I mean, the media is just going explosive with Herc. Wow. The outcome of the front four was so impactful. I love the playmaking of Coach Grinch. Game plan was great. They were just making plays all day. And Nnamdi Oguayo he's just starting to show up. So a lot of good stuff there. Hey, you are listening to the Podcast Coug. Second part of the program, second part of the half, we're going to talk about the Oregon State game coming up right after the break.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the Podcast Coug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at podcastcoug.com.
Everybody, welcome back to the second part of the program on the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie. Hey, Oregon State Saturday at 2:30, Martin, and going to be a great time and a great game. Remember the Cougar Prawl at the field house. If you want to be there for the band and the coaches and Butch and the cheerleaders and the Crimson Girls and the band, that is at 12:15, somewhere around there, right outside the field house for Saturday's game against Oregon State. Here we go. 21. We are ranked 21, 2-0. Oregon State is at 1-2. And, of course, Pac-12 Network's covering the game. We're a 16-point favorite. Gary Anderson, head coach, is 7-20 at Oregon State. He was, if you recall, he was the head coach at Utah State and at Wisconsin. And I never got the lowdown on why he left the Badgers to come over to Oregon State. Never. I don't understand that. But Wisconsin, great program there, and he bolted to go to Oregon State. Has not had a lot of success. He's in a rebuilding mode. Again, he's 7-20. Their star players, quarterback Jake Luton. Luton grew up in Marysville, north of Everett, led the Marysville Pilchuck High School to the West Coast 3A League Championship his senior year. Originally, Luton signed with Idaho, and then he transferred to Ventura College after his redshirt sophomore year. He joined the Beavs in January and then won the starting job in camp. Luton has been reliable for the Beavs this season, completing 61% of his passes. He's got 674 yards under his belt, has thrown for 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. All right, not a big concern, but Jake Luton is a good quarterback. Their running back, Ryan Nall. Nall is a junior. He was the 2016 All Pac-12 Honorable Mention selection and finished his sophomore season with 951 rushing yards. He exploded for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns on 19 carries when in the Beavs' defeat against Washington State last year in Corvallis, and is currently averaging about 69 yards rushing per game. So he also has 2 rushing touchdowns. So watch out for Ryan Nall, running back. Safety David Morris. Morris is 6'3", 197-pound freshman safety that leads the Beavs defense with 25 tackles this season. And he had 17 in the loss to Minnesota last week. He's one of 5 true freshmen who's played for Oregon State this season. It's a young team, and check this out. The number of sacks Oregon State's defense has managed this season, you know how many sacks they've had? 0. Yikes. Wow. 0. There's some big concerns with that Gary Anderson has. So he's in a complete rebuilding year. 46 number of points opponents are averaging against the Beavs this year. So everybody's scoring on these guys. All right. I don't see any threat unless the Cougs just don't show up, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think Luke's going to have a field day. It's going to be a boat race. Well, pretty much. I think it's going to just be a boat race. They are in the bottom of the Pac-12. Luke's not going to be pressured. 0 sacks at all. I mean, are you kidding me? So I think Luke's going to come out fine. Whether he will hit his receivers or not, I think it certainly can do the dink and dunk, and we should be great with our running backs. And the latest news that came out on Tuesday is Oregon State is without its top 2 cornerbacks that are going to for Saturday. So their top 2 quarterbacks are out. Things just got a little tougher for Oregon State's defense, and the Beavers released this injury report on Tuesday morning, announcing their 2 starting quarterbacks. One is sophomore Xavier Crawford, junior, and Dwayne Williams. They're out for Saturday's game. Okay, so here we are, ranked 21. By the way, Williams suffered a torn ACL in the first half of the Beavers game against Minnesota last week, and literally is done for the season. Crawford injured his shoulder in their defeat against their loss to the Golden Gophers. So it's a huge blow for the Beavs. against our pass-heavy offense. It's not a concern at all. So it should be a great time on Saturday. Hope you're going to be there. This is just going to be a great game. We're going to recap. We're basically going to come back next week. We're going to talk about, again, the Oregon State game and the forthcoming Nevada game. And if you recall, Nevada is a 3 p.m. kick. So we got another afternoon game. That's the fourth home game in a row. And then we got SC coming to town on the 29th, which is on Friday. So that's it. We'll talk to you next week. And have a great Saturday, and go Cougs.
You've been listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the PodcastCoug Radio Network. Find us at PodcastCoug.com.